Luke Harding stood at the edge of his property line, watching the sun bleed crimson across the Arizona desert. The wind carried dust and sage, mixing with the familiar scent of cattle and leather that had become his life. At 32, he was already weathered beyond his years, hands calloused from mending fences, face lined from squinting against the harsh sun, shoulders broad from hauling water and feed. The ranch sprawled before him, 2,000 acres of scrub and grassland that his father had claimed 20 years ago. Now it was just Luke and the land. Ever since consumption took the old man last winter, the house felt too quiet without his father's coughing, the barn too empty without his gruff morning complaints about the weather or the government, or both. Luke pushed his hat back and wiped sweat from his brow. The cattle needed moving to the south pasture before the waterhole dried up completely. There were fences to mend along the eastern boundary where the storms had knocked them flat. The roof on the storage shed leaked something terrible. A rancher's work was never done, and Luke threw himself into it with the determination of a man trying to outrun his thoughts. But the thoughts came anyway, especially at night. 3 months. That's how long the dreams had been visiting him. Every single night without fail, as regular as the moon's path across the sky. At first, Luke had blamed the whiskey, though he rarely drank more than a finger's worth before bed. Then he'd blamed the heat, the loneliness, the grief over his father. But the dreams persisted, growing clearer and more vivid with each passing night. She came to him in those dreams like smoke on the wind, an Apache woman, tall and proud, with eyes dark as midnight and hair that flowed like black water down her back. She wore traditional dress, soft deerskin adorned with beadwork that caught the light of dream fires. Her face was strong, beautiful in a way that made his chest tight, high cheekbones, full lips that rarely smiled. And those eyes, Lord, those eyes seemed to look straight through him, to places he didn't know existed in his soul. In the dreams, she never spoke. Sometimes she stood at the edge of his ranch, right where the desert began to rise into the mountains. Other times she appeared closer, by the well, near the corral, once even on his own porch, but always watching him with an expression he couldn't read, waiting, calling without words. Luke had never been a man given to fancy. His father had raised him practical, focused on cattle prices and rainfall, fence posts and branding irons. Dreams were for fools and children, the old man used to say. A rancher dealt in reality, in things he could touch and measure and sell. Yet these dreams felt more real than his waking hours. He could smell the cedar smoke in her hair, feel the desert wind that stirred her dress, see the intricate patterns of her beadwork as clearly as if he were standing inches away. When he woke, his heart would be pounding, his sheets soaked with sweat, and an ache in his chest like homesickness for a place he'd never been. Getting soft in the head, Luke muttered to himself, heading back toward the house. His boots kicked up small clouds of dust with each step. Next thing, I'll be reading tea leaves and consulting fortune tellers. The ranch house squatted low against the landscape, built solid from adobe and timber to withstand the desert's moods. Inside, it was sparse but clean. A table, 2 chairs, his father's rocking chair by the fireplace, a narrow bed in the back room. Bachelor's quarters now, though his mother's curtains still hung in the windows, faded from years of sun. Luke pumped water from the kitchen well, splashing his face and neck. The cool water helped clear his head some, bringing him back to practical matters. He needed to check on the pregnant heifer in the barn, make sure she wasn't showing signs of early labor. The Hendersons were coming by tomorrow to look at some yearlings. He should oil the saddles before the leather cracked in this dry spell. But as the sun set and shadows grew long across the floorboards, Luke felt the familiar pull of exhaustion mixed with anticipation. He fought it, staying up to mend a bridle by lamplight, reading the week-old newspaper from town twice through. Yet, eventually, his eyelids grew heavy, and he couldn't fight it anymore. The dream came as it always did, sliding into his consciousness like water seeping through sand. This time, she stood by the old cottonwood near the creek bed. The tree was mostly dead in real life, struck by lightning years back, but in the dream it bloomed full and green. She leaned against its trunk, one hand touching the bark, her eyes finding his across the impossible distance of sleep. She was barefoot, and he could see the dust on her feet, the way her toes pressed into the earth as if she belonged to it. Her dress moved in a breeze he couldn't feel, and around her neck hung a necklace of turquoise and silver that caught moonlight that shouldn't exist. For the first time in 3 months of dreams, she moved. Not toward him, but she lifted her free hand, palm out, fingers spread. A greeting? A warning? Luke tried to step forward, but his legs were rooted like the cottonwood. He tried to call out, but his throat produced no sound. Then she spoke, not with her lips, which remained still, but somehow her voice filled his mind, clear as spring water and twice as cold. The time grows short, the path narrows. Choose! Luke woke gasping. His hand clutched to his chest, where his heart hammered against his ribs. The room was pitch dark, the lamp having burned out while he dozed in the chair. He stumbled to the window, throwing it open to gulp the night air. The desert stretched out silent and vast. Stars scattered across the sky like spilled salt. Everything was as it should be. The barn, a dark shape against the horizon. The windmill creaking softly. A coyote calling somewhere in the distance. But Luke couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed, that some invisible line had been crossed. He didn't sleep the rest of the night. Instead, he sat on the porch with his rifle across his knees, watching the darkness and wondering if he was losing his mind. His father would have had no patience for this. Work cures all ailments. The old man would have said, keep your hands busy and your mind won't have time for foolishness. When dawn finally came, painting the mountains purple and gold, Luke was hollow-eyed but determined. He would work himself into exhaustion today. Move the cattle, fix the fences, dig a new irrigation ditch if he had to. Anything to stop thinking about her, the woman who existed only in his dreams but felt more real than the ground beneath his feet. He saddled his horse, a steady paint named Moses, and rode out to check the herd. The morning was already warm, promising another scorching day. The cattle were clustered near the failing waterhole, lowing mournfully. Luke counted heads, checked for signs of sickness or injury, his mind grateful for the routine. But even as he worked, he found his eyes drawn to the horizon, to the place where the mountains rose like ancient guardians. That was Apache territory, or had been before the government pushed them onto reservations. His father had told him stories, raids and retaliations, blood spilled on both sides, a history written in violence and mistrust. Yet the woman in his dreams didn't feel like an enemy. She felt like, what? Luke couldn't put words to it. Like recognition. Like coming home. Like a question that demanded an answer he didn't know how to give. By midday, the sun was brutal. Luke took shelter in the measly shade of a rocky outcropping, sharing water from his canteen with Moses. His shirt was soaked through with sweat, his muscles aching from the morning's labor. But the physical exhaustion brought no peace. If anything, it made the dreams feel more vivid in his memory, as if fatigue had worn away his defenses against them. "What do you want from me?" he asked the empty desert. A lizard skittered across a nearby rock, but otherwise, nothing answered. The ride back to the ranch house was slow, Moses picking his way carefully through the loose stones and gullies. Luke's mind wandered despite his best efforts to focus on immediate concerns. He found himself thinking about the cottonwood tree in the dream, how green and alive it had been. In reality, the lightning-struck tree was a gray skeleton, its dead branches reaching toward the sky like arthritic fingers as they crested the final rise before the ranch. Moses suddenly shied, nearly throwing Luke from the saddle. He grabbed the horn, steadying himself, then followed the horse's gaze. There, by the dead cottonwood that had been so alive in his dream, stood a figure. For a moment, Luke's vision swam. The heat shimmer rising from the ground made everything wavery, uncertain. But as he blinked and focused, his breath caught in his throat. It couldn't be. Yet there was no denying what his eyes saw. She was real. The woman from his dream stood in the shade of the dead tree, as solid and present as the horse beneath him. And she was looking directly at him, those midnight eyes holding an expression that made every dream he'd had seem like a pale shadow of this moment. Luke's hands tightened on the reins until the leather creaked. Moses stamped nervously, sensing his rider's shock. The woman didn't move, just stood there beneath the skeletal branches of the cottonwood, watching him with those dark eyes that had haunted his sleep for 3 months. She was exactly as he'd dreamed her, yet different too. The dreams had captured her beauty, her presence, but they'd missed something essential, the way she held herself. Alert as a deer ready to bolt, proud as the mountains behind her. Her traditional dress was travel-worn, dust clinging to the hem, and her moccasins showed the wear of many miles. This was no spirit or vision. This was flesh and blood, real as the sweat running down his spine. Luke dismounted slowly, not wanting to spook her, or maybe not wanting to spook himself. His boots hit the ground with a soft thud, and he stood there holding Moses's reins. 20 yards separating him from impossibility made real. "Ma'am," he said, then felt foolish. "What did you say to a dream that stepped into daylight?" She tilted her head slightly, studying him. When she spoke, her voice was exactly as it had been in the dream, clear and cool, though now it carried an accent that marked English as her second language. "You have seen me before." It wasn't a question. Luke nodded, his throat dry as the desert around them. "Every night, for 3 months." Something flickered in her eyes. Surprise? Relief? "Then it is true. Grandmother was right." She took a step forward, and Luke saw how gracefully she moved, how the earth seemed to welcome her feet. "I am called Naomi. It means I love you in my tongue. Luke," he managed. "Luke Harding. This is my land, my ranch." "I know." She gestured to the dead tree. "I have seen this place many times. Seen you in dreams that come whether I wish them or not." The rational part of Luke's mind, the part his father had trained, screamed that this was madness. People didn't share dreams. Apache women didn't appear from nowhere speaking of visions. But the rest of him, the part that had spent 3 months yearning for something he couldn't name, recognized the truth of her words. "Your dreams," he said carefully. "They were like mine?" Naomi moved closer, close enough that he could see the fine beadwork on her dress, the way the sun caught the silver in her necklace. A man with hair the color of dried grass, eyes like the sky before storm, working with cattle, mending fences, sitting alone by firelight. Her gaze swept over him. "You." Luke's knees felt weak. He looped Moses's reins around a dead branch and took off his hat, running fingers through his sweat-damp hair. "This can't be real, yet here we stand." There was the faintest hint of humor in her voice. "Unless you believe us both mad. Maybe we are." But he found himself moving closer too, drawn by the same force that had pulled him from sleep night after night. Why the dreams?" Naomi's expression grew serious. "My grandmother was a holy woman, a dreamer of true dreams. Before she walked the spirit path, she told me I would know my fate through visions, that a man would come to me in sleep, and I must find him or forever walk half alive." She paused, looking away toward the mountains. "I did not believe, not until the dreams began. And you came looking for me. What else could I do?" The question held a weight of resignation and determination mixed. "I left my people, my family, traveled many days, following what the dreams showed me. The land, the ranch, the tree struck by sky fire." She touched the dead cottonwood's trunk. "And you?" Luke realized his hands were shaking. He clenched them into fists, trying to process what she was telling him. An Apache woman had abandoned her tribe to find a white rancher she'd only seen in dreams. It was the kind of story people told around campfires to spook children, not something that happened in the harsh light of Arizona noon. "You must be hungry," he said, falling back on hospitality because he didn't know what else to do. "Thirsty. The house isn't much, but there's water, food." She studied him for a long moment. "You do not fear me? Should I? Your people fear mine. My people have reason to hate yours." The words were matter-of-fact, carrying the weight of history. Luke thought of his father's stories, the raids and counter-raids, the blood and sorrow on both sides. But looking at Naomi, He felt no fear, only a strange sense of recognition, as if some empty place in his chest had suddenly found what it was shaped to hold. "I'm not my people," he said, "and you're not yours, right now. You're a woman who's traveled far and needs rest. That's all that matters." Something softened in her face. She nodded once, decisively. "Then I accept." The walk to the ranch house felt surreal. Luke led Moses while Nayeli walked beside him, her steps silent on the packed earth. He kept glancing at her, half expecting her to vanish like morning mist. But she remained solid, real, occasionally brushing a strand of long black hair from her face when the wind caught it. "Your family," Luke ventured. "They let you go?" Her jaw tightened. "They do not know. I left in the night, like a thief. My brother Tazewell will be—" She searched for the word. "Furious. He is war chief, protector of our band. He will see this as betrayal." "Will he come looking?" "Perhaps, probably." She shrugged, a gesture that tried for casualness but didn't quite succeed. "The reservation is 2 days' ride. He may think I have gone to other relatives, or he may track me here." Luke thought about what that might mean. Apache warriors showing up at his ranch. His father would be spinning in his grave. But when he looked at Nayeli, he found he didn't care. At the house, he pumped fresh water into a basin for her to wash the trail dust away. She drank deeply from the ladle first, closing her eyes as the cool water went down. When she opened them again, she caught him staring. "The dreams did not lie about your eyes," she said simply. "Gray-blue, like storm clouds." Heat crept up Luke's neck. He busied himself slicing bread and dried beef, setting out what preserves he had. It wasn't much, but she ate with quiet appreciation, her movements precise and graceful even in hunger. "How long since you left your people?" he asked. 4 days. I had a little food, but it ran out yesterday." She touched the turquoise necklace at her throat. "This would have bought supplies in a town, but an Apache woman alone in a white town wouldn't be safe." Luke finished the thought grimly. Just so. They sat at his small table, the same table where he'd eaten countless lonely meals, and the strangeness of the situation hit him anew. Yesterday his biggest concern had been moving cattle. Today, a woman from his dreams sat in his kitchen, speaking of shared visions and destiny. "The dreams," he said. "When did yours start?" "The same as yours. I think 3 moons ago. First, just glimpses. A man's hands mending leather. A house of mud and wood. Cattle with strange markings. Then clearer. Your face. This place." She gestured around the simple room. "Even this table, these chairs. And your grandmother's prophecy?" Nayeli's fingers traced the grain of the wooden table. She was dying. The sickness that steals breath had taken hold. Her last words to me were strange, fevered. She spoke of dreams that would bind me to someone not of our people, that I would have to choose between the life I knew and a love not yet born. Her eyes met his. I thought it was the illness speaking. I should have known better. Grandmother's words always carried truth, even when we wished they didn't. Luke felt that pull again. Stronger now with her sitting across from him. It would be so easy to reach out, to touch her hand where it rested on the table, but a lifetime of caution held him back. "This is crazy," he said. "You know that, right? People don't share dreams. They don't cross territories and trust strangers because of visions." "No," Nayeli agreed. "They do not. Yet here we are." She stood, moving to the window to look out at the ranch. "I have thought of little else for days. How to explain what cannot be explained. Why I would leave everything I know for a man I have never met." She turned back to him. "But you felt it too, didn't you? The pull, the certainty that something waited for you, something important." Luke stood as well, restless. "I've never been much for spiritual things. My father raised me practical. And yet you dreamed. And yet I dreamed," he admitted. A sound from outside made them both tense. Hoofbeats, coming fast. Luke grabbed his rifle from beside the door, checking the load. Naeli's hand went to her side where a knife would hang. Finding nothing. "Stay inside," Luke said, but she shook her head. "If there is danger, I face it too." He didn't have time to argue. The hoofbeats were getting closer, and from the sound, there were several riders. Luke stepped onto the porch, rifle ready but not raised. Naeli stood beside him, chin high, every inch the proud woman from his dreams. The riders came into view, 5 men from town, led by Sheriff Miles Campbell. Luke's heart sank. News traveled fast in the territory, and someone must have seen Naeli on her journey here. Sheriff Campbell reined up just outside comfortable talking distance, his hand resting on his pistol. The other men spread out slightly, a move that wasn't quite surrounding them but suggested it could happen quick enough. "Afternoon, Luke," the sheriff said, but his eyes were fixed on Naeli. "Heard you might have some unusual company." Luke kept his stance easy, but his grip on the rifle was firm. "Just a traveler needing water and rest, Sheriff. Nothing unusual about showing Christian hospitality." Sheriff Campbell's weathered face remained skeptical. "Christian hospitality to an Apache? That's mighty unusual in these parts, son. Since when is it a crime to help someone in need?" "Since that someone might be a scout for raiders," said Ben Morrison, one of the riders, a man who'd lost his brother in an Apache raid years back. His voice carried old poison. "Could be sizing up your ranch, seeing what's worth taking." Naeli spoke then, her English careful but clear. "I scout for no one. I travel alone." "An Apache woman alone?" Sheriff Campbell leaned forward in his saddle. "Now that's even more unusual. Your people don't let their women wander off, unless you're running from something. Or someone." Luke felt Naeli tense beside him, but her voice remained steady. "My path is my own." "Not in this territory. It isn't." Morrison spat. "We've worked too hard to make this land safe to let Apache spies. That's enough. Ben?" The sheriff cut him off, though his eyes never left Naeli. "Luke, you know the situation. The treaty's hanging by a thread. Any incident could spark trouble we don't need. Having her here, it doesn't look good." "She's my guest," Luke said firmly. "On my land. That's all anyone needs to know. Your guest." The sheriff's tone made it clear what he thought of that. "And how long will your guest be staying?" Luke felt something shift inside him, a decision crystallizing that he hadn't even known he was making. "As long as she chooses." The words hung in the air like a challenge. The riders exchanged glances, and Luke could read their thoughts plain as day. He'd been a good neighbor, a respectable rancher following in his father's footsteps. Now here he was, defending an Apache woman, choosing her over them. "Luke!" Sheriff Campbell's voice took on a warning edge. "Think about what you're doing. Your father." "My father's dead." The words came out harsher than Luke intended. "This is my ranch, my decision." "Your decision affects all of us," said another rider, Tom Brennan, who owned the neighboring spread. "If her people come looking and find her here, it won't just be your ranch they target." Naeli stepped forward, and Luke admired how she faced down 5 armed men without flinching. "My people do not know where I am. I bring no danger to this place." "You are the danger," Morrison snarled. "Every one of you is—" Luke raised his rifle then, not pointing it at anyone but making his position clear. "I said that's enough. You've delivered your message. Now get off my land." The sheriff's hand tightened on his pistol grip. "Don't be a fool, boy. You're throwing away everything for a woman you don't even know." But that was where the sheriff was wrong. Luke did know her. He'd known her in dreams that felt more real than 3 decades of waking life. He knew the way she moved, proud and careful. He knew the depth in her dark eyes, the strength in her stance. He knew her in ways he couldn't explain and didn't need to. "I know enough," he said quietly. Sheriff Campbell studied him for a long moment, and Luke could see the man calculating whether to push this now or wait. Finally, the sheriff wheeled his horse around. "Sundown," he said. "If she's still here at sundown, we'll be back, and it won't just be talk." He looked at the other men. "Let's go." They rode off in a cloud of dust, but Luke could feel their anger hanging in the air like smoke. He lowered the rifle, suddenly aware that his hands were shaking. "You have made enemies for me," Naeli said softly. They were already there, just hadn't shown themselves yet. He turned to look at her. "You don't have to stay. I can give you supplies, a horse. You could—" "Run?" She shook her head. "I have done my running. The dreams brought me here. I will not flee at the first sign of trouble." They went back inside, the house feeling smaller somehow, charged with unspoken things. Luke paced to the window, watching the dust from the riders settle. "They'll be back," he said. "The sheriff doesn't make idle threats. Then we have until sundown to decide." "Decide what?" She moved to stand beside him at the window. "What we are to each other. Why the dreams brought us together. Whether it is worth fighting for." Luke turned to face her fully. This close, he could see flecks of gold in her dark eyes, could smell the sage and cedar that clung to her hair. "I don't even know you." "No?" She reached up, her fingers barely brushing his cheek. "Then why does this feel like memory?" At her touch, something electric passed between them. Not desire, though that was there too, but recognition, deep and inexplicable, like finding a piece of yourself you didn't know was missing. Luke caught her hand, holding it against his face. "The dreams. In the dreams. You were trying to tell me something. What was it?" "I was trying to say what my grandmother told me, that some connections are written before we are born, that fighting them is like fighting the wind, possible, but exhausting and futile. You believe that?" "I did not want to. I wanted my life to follow the path I knew, marriage to a warrior of my people, children raised in our ways, growing old surrounded by family." Her thumb traced his cheekbone, but the dreams would not let me rest. "Every night, your face, every morning, waking with your name on my lips, though I did not know it yet. Naeli." He tested her name, found it fit perfectly in his mouth. "What do we do?" She lowered her hand but didn't step away. "First, we prepare. If they come at sundown, they will expect you to be alone, shamed into sending me away. They will not expect resistance. You're talking about a fight." "I am talking about standing for what we choose." Her chin lifted. "I did not cross mountains and desert to flee at the first threat." Luke thought about what this meant. He'd built a quiet life here, respecting his neighbors even if he didn't much like them, keeping to himself, avoiding trouble. One afternoon, and all that was crumbling. But when he looked at Naeli, he couldn't find it in himself to care. "There's an old line shack up in the hills," he said. "Defensive position, water nearby. We could—" "No." Her voice was firm. "If we run now, we will always be running. They need to know that I am here by choice, that you protect me by choice. Otherwise, they will never let us be." She was right, and Luke knew it. The sheriff and his men would hound them wherever they went unless they made a stand here. "Now, can you shoot?" he asked. A small smile curved her lips. "I can draw a bow. A gun is not so different." He fetched his father's old Navy Colt, checking the loads. "This kicks hard. Aim low. It pulls up and to the right." She took the weapon, testing its weight, sighting down the barrel. Her hands were steady, competent. Of course they were. This was a woman who'd traveled alone through hostile territory on the strength of dreams. A little gunplay wouldn't shake her. They spent the afternoon preparing. Luke showed her the layout of the ranch, the approaches riders would likely take. They filled water buckets in case of fire, loaded extra ammunition, positioned furniture to provide cover if needed. As they worked side by side, Luke felt that strange sense of recognition growing stronger, the way she anticipated his movements, the way they communicated with glances and gestures. It was like a dance they'd rehearsed 1,000 times. "Tell me about your brother," Luke said as they took a brief rest. "This pays well." Naeli's expression grew complicated. "He is 10 winters older. When our parents died, he raised me, taught me to track, to hunt, to defend myself." She paused. "He is a good man, but hard. The wars, the betrayals, they have made him see enemies everywhere. He'll come looking for you." "Yes, But not today. I think, first he will search among our people, thinking I have gone to relatives. Only when that fails will he look beyond. She touched the knife at her belt. Luke had given her one of his. When he comes, it will be worse than your sheriff. Tazewell does not make threats. He acts. We'll deal with that when it happens. She studied him. You say we so easily. Doesn't feel like there's any other way to say it. The sun was sinking lower, painting the desert gold and crimson. Luke checked his rifle for the 10th time, trying to calm the nerves jumping in his stomach. He'd been in scrapes before, cattle rustlers, a mountain cat that got too close to the house. But this was different. This was choosing a side in a conflict older than he was. Luke. Nayeli's voice was soft. If you ask me to go, I will go. I have brought enough trouble to your life already. He turned to her. Seeing the offer was genuine, she would leave to protect him, even though it would mean giving up whatever had brought them together. Remember what you said about fighting the wind? He managed a crooked smile. Well, I'm tired just thinking about fighting this, whatever this is between us. She moved closer, and he could feel the warmth radiating from her. The dreams showed me many things. Your kindness to animals, your grief for your father, the loneliness that eats at you like hunger. Her hand found his. But they could not show me this, how it would feel to stand beside you, real and present. It is more than I expected. Luke turned his hand to intertwine their fingers. Her palm was calloused like his, working hands that knew hardship. But her touch was gentle. Sure. They're coming, she said, though neither of them moved to look. They could hear it, horses approaching as the sun touched the horizon. Together? Luke asked. Together, she confirmed. They took their positions, Luke at the front window with his rifle, Nayeli at the side window with the Colt. The riders came into view, more this time. The sheriff had brought 8 men, expecting trouble or hoping to prevent it through numbers. But as they approached, Luke felt strangely calm. The woman beside him had crossed territories and risked everything because of shared dreams. The least he could do was stand his ground for what those dreams had brought him. Sheriff Campbell called out from beyond rifle range. Last chance. Luke, send her out, and we all go home peaceful. Luke's answer was to step onto the porch, rifle ready. This is her home now, if she wants it. Anyone who's got a problem with that can take it up with me. And me, Nayeli added, appearing beside him, the Colt steady in her hands. The sheriff's face darkened. You're making a mistake, boy. This won't end well. Maybe not, Luke agreed. But it's my mistake to make. The two groups faced each other as the sun died behind the mountains, painting everything the color of blood and gold. And in that moment, Luke understood what Nayeli had meant about connections written before birth. Some things you chose, others chose you. This, whatever this was, had chosen them both. The standoff stretched taut as a bowstring. Sheriff Campbell sat his horse like a man carved from stone, weighing his options. Behind him, the townsmen shifted nervously in their saddles. Luke could see Ben Morrison's hand twitching near his gun, could feel the violence hanging in the air like a coming storm. You're harboring a hostile, the sheriff said finally. That makes you as guilty as any renegade in the territory. She's no hostile, Luke replied, keeping his voice steady. Just a woman seeking a new life. Apache don't seek new lives with white men. Tom Brennan called out. They come to spy, to steal, to kill? Nayeli interrupted, her voice cutting sharp. If I came for blood, would I walk openly in daylight? Would I stand here with one gun against 80? Tricks. Morrison spat. Your people are full of tricks. Sheriff Campbell raised a hand for silence. Here's what's going to happen. The woman comes with us. We'll take her to the territorial marshal. Let him sort out whether she's a threat. You can visit her there. Luke, plead your case proper-like. Luke knew what that meant. An Apache woman in territorial custody wouldn't last a week. She'd either be shipped to the reservation or worse, lost in some jail where questions didn't get asked. No, he said simply. The sheriff's face hardened. Don't be a fool, boy. You're outnumbered and outgunned. This doesn't have to end in blood. Then ride away, Luke suggested. Leave us be, and nobody bleeds today. Can't do that. Campbell shifted in his saddle. You've made your choice. Now we make ours. He looked at his men. Ben, Tom, circle around the side. Rest of you. The sharp crack of a rifle cut through his words. Not from Luke or Nayeli, but from somewhere behind the riders. A bullet kicked up dust at the sheriff's horse's feet, making the animal dance sideways. Nobody move! The voice came from the rocks above the trail. Young, male, and deadly serious. Next one goes through something besides dirt. Luke scanned the rocky outcrop and spotted him. A young man, maybe 17 or 18, with a rifle trained on the sheriff's party. He had the lean build of someone raised tough, and even at this distance, Luke could see the family resemblance to Nayeli in his features. Samuel. Nayeli breathed beside him. No, you fool boy. Sheriff Campbell had his hand on his gun but hadn't drawn. Who's that? Another Apache? My cousin, Nayeli called out, anger and fear mixing in her voice. Samuel, what are you doing here? Following you, like Tay's well ordered. The young man's voice carried down clear, making sure you stayed safe. Looks like you need it. This isn't your fight, Nayeli said. Your family. Your fight is mine. Samuel adjusted his position, keeping the rifle trained on the riders. These men threatening you, cousin? The situation had shifted dramatically. The townsmen were caught in the open between two defensive positions. Luke could see them calculating, realizing they'd lost their advantage. Listen here, boy, Sheriff Campbell called up to Samuel. We're lawmen, keeping the peace. Put down that rifle before what? Samuel's voice held dark amusement. Before you attack a rancher on his own land, before you drag away a woman who's done no wrong. He chambered another round, the sound carrying clear in the evening air. I count 8 of you. I've got 15 rounds and I don't miss. Want to see how many I can drop before you reach cover? Damn Apache, Morrison snarled, starting to draw his weapon. Ben, no, the sheriff barked. But it was too late. Morrison's gun cleared leather just as Luke swung his rifle to cover him. Nayeli fired first, her shot taking Morrison's hat off and sending him tumbling from his horse. He hit the ground hard, gun flying from his hand. Nobody else move, Luke commanded, his rifle now trained on the sheriff. Ben, you alive down there? Morrison groaned, clutching his head where it had struck a rock. Blood seeped between his fingers, but he was conscious. Could have killed him, Nayeli said calmly, the Colt still steady in her hands. Chose not to. Choose wisely, Sheriff. Campbell's jaw worked like he was chewing nails. The mathematics were clear. They were exposed, caught between defenders with good positions. Even if they won, men would die. Tom, the sheriff said finally. Help Ben onto his horse. Sheriff, one of the other men protested. Do it! Campbell's voice brooked no argument. We're leaving. Tom Brennan dismounted, helping the dazed Morrison to his feet. As they struggled to get him back on his horse, the sheriff kept his eyes locked on Luke. This isn't over, he said. You've chosen to stand with hostiles against your own people. There'll be consequences. I've chosen to stand with someone who's done no harm, Luke countered. If that makes me your enemy, that's your doing, not mine. The Apache boy comes with us. Campbell tried one last gambit. Samuel's laugh echoed off the rocks. Come and get me, lawman. The sheriff's face darkened further, but he knew he was beaten. With Morrison finally in the saddle, swaying but upright. Campbell wheeled his horse around. You've got tonight, he said. Come morning, this gets official, territorial marshal, maybe even cavalry. You really want to pit yourself against the United States Army, Luke? I want to be left in peace. Luke replied, That's all I've ever wanted. Too late for that now. The sheriff spurred his horse, and the group rode off. Morrison slumped over his saddle horn, the others casting dark looks back at the ranch. Luke waited until they were well out of range before lowering his rifle. His arms were shaking, whether from tension or the weight of what had just happened. He couldn't say. Samuel emerged from the rocks, moving with the quiet grace that marked him as Apache trained. Up close, he was younger than Luke had thought, with intelligent eyes and a serious set to his mouth. "Samuel Yazzie," he said, offering his hand to Luke. "Naeli's fool cousin who can't follow orders. Tazewell told you to watch, not interfere," Naeli said sharply in Apache, then switched to English. "You were to report back, nothing more." "Report what? That you found your dream man and were about to get shot for it?" Samuel shook his head. "Tazewell might skin me, but at least you'll be alive to watch." "My brother knows." Naeli's voice went quiet. "Of course he knows. You think you can sneak away and he won't notice? He had me following within an hour." Samuel looked at Luke with frank curiosity. "So you're the one from her dreams. Don't look like much." "Samuel," Naeli snapped. "What? I'm supposed to be impressed because he stood up to some town bullies?" But there was approval in the young man's eyes that belied his words. "Though I guess any man who'd face down 8 riders for a woman he just met has some backbone." "We need to get inside," Luke said, still watching the dust trail of the departed riders. "They'll be back, and in force." Inside the house, Samuel looked around with interest while Naeli heated water for coffee. The cousins fell into rapid Apache, their words too quick for Luke to even guess at the meaning. He caught his name several times, and Tazewell's, and what sounded like arguments going back and forth. Finally, Samuel switched back to English. "My orders were to watch and report, but I'm thinking Tazewell needs to hear about this in person." He looked at Luke. "You understand what you've done, standing against those men for her?" "I understand they gave me no choice. There's always a choice. You could have sent her away." Luke met the young man's gaze steadily. "No, I couldn't." Samuel studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "The dreams. Naeli told me about them, but I didn't believe. Thought maybe she was touched by spirits, seeing things that weren't there." He glanced at his cousin. "But you dream her too? Every night for 3 months?" "Huh." Samuel accepted a cup of coffee from Naeli, wrapping his hands around its warmth. "Grandmother always said there were bonds that went deeper than blood, older than memory. Never put much stock in it myself." "You don't have to believe," Naeli said. "Just tell Tazewell what you've seen. Tell him I'm safe, that I've made my choice." "Oh, I'll tell him. Whether he accepts it." Samuel shrugged. "You know how he is. His baby sister running off to live with a white rancher? He'll come. Maybe not tomorrow, but soon. And when he does, you better hope your man here is as good with that rifle as he is brave, because Tazewell won't come alone, and he won't come talking." The 3 of them sat in silence for a moment, the weight of future troubles settling over the room. Then Samuel set down his cup and stood. "I need to go. Long ride back, and Tazewell's waiting." He looked at Luke. "You seem like a decent man, but decent won't be enough when my cousin's brother comes calling." "You sure you want this fight?" Luke looked at Naeli, who was watching him with those deep, dark eyes that had haunted his sleep. In them, he saw possibility and danger in equal measure, a life that would never be simple, never be safe, but might, just might, be worth living. "I'm sure," he said. Samuel nodded, unsurprised. "Then I'll tell Tazewell he better bring his best warriors, because something tells me you won't go down easy." He turned to Naeli, switching to Apache for what sounded like a farewell. She embraced him quickly, pressing something into his hand, a small beaded token. "For luck," she said, "and to remind Tazewell that I am still his sister, no matter what choices I make." After Samuel left, melting into the darkness with the skill of his people, Luke and Naeli stood on the porch watching the stars emerge. The night was cooling rapidly, and she moved closer to him, not quite touching, but near enough that he could feel her presence like warmth. "Your brother," Luke said. "Tell me what we're facing." "A man who has lost too much," she replied softly. "Parents to sickness, friends to war, land to treaties that mean nothing. I am all the family he has left, and he guards what is his fiercely. Can he be reasoned with? Perhaps, if he sees that you are worthy, that you will protect me as he would." She paused. "Or he might simply try to kill you and drag me home." "Comforting." She turned to face him fully. "I brought this to your door, these troubles, this danger. You could still—" "If you tell me one more time to send you away, I might actually get annoyed." Luke managed a wry smile. "We've established I'm not that smart." "No." She agreed, and for the first time, she truly smiled. A transformation that made his heart skip. "You are not lucky for me." They stood together as the night deepened. Two people brought together by dreams neither understood, facing troubles from two worlds. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, the sheriff's threats, Tazewell's eventual arrival, the judgment of two peoples who would never understand. But tonight, they had this, a moment of quiet between storms, and the strange certainty that whatever came, they would face it as they had faced today's threat, together. The drums came with the dawn, a steady rhythm that seemed to rise from the earth itself. Luke woke instantly, his hand reaching for the rifle before his eyes were fully open. Beside him on the floor, they'd taken turns keeping watch. Nayeli was already alert, her face grave. "How many?" he asked. She listened to the drums, reading their language. 10, maybe 12. Tazewell brought his best warriors." She rose gracefully, moving to the window. "They're making camp beyond the eastern ridge, close enough to watch, far enough to make us come to them." Luke joined her at the window. The morning sun painted the desert gold and crimson, but he could see no sign of the Apache party. They were out there, though. He could feel them like electricity in the air. "How long do we have?" "Tazewell will wait for the sun to climb. He'll want to see your face clearly when he judges you." She turned from the window, and Luke saw the conflict in her eyes. "I should go to him." "Explain." "We go together, or not at all." She studied him for a long moment. "You understand what this means? Tazewell is not like your sheriff. He won't be driven off by brave words and rifle shots. If he decides you're unworthy, he'll kill you, and I'll have to watch my brother and the man from my dreams try to destroy each other." Luke checked his rifle, then strapped on his pistol. "Then we better make sure he decides I'm worthy. It's not that simple. To him, you represent everything that's destroyed our people. Every broken treaty, every stolen acre of land, every Apache child taken to white schools." She touched his arm. "The dreams brought us together, but they can't erase history." "No," Luke agreed. "But maybe we can start writing a different chapter." They prepared in silence, Luke cleaning his weapons one more time. Nayeli braiding her hair in a complex pattern that seemed to have meaning beyond simple practicality. She'd changed into a dress she'd carried in her pack, one decorated with intricate beadwork that caught the morning light. "War patterns," she explained, seeing his look. "To show I come as a warrior's sister, not as a fugitive." When the sun had climbed a hand's breadth above the horizon, they walked out together. Luke had faced dangerous men before, but walking toward that ridge knowing Apache warriors waited beyond tested every nerve he had. Only Nayeli's presence beside him kept his steps steady. They crested the ridge to find the Apache camp spread before them, not hiding now, but displayed in full strength. Warriors sat around a small fire, their faces painted, weapons close at hand, and at their center sat Tazewell. Luke had expected someone older, given how Nayeli spoke of him, but Tazewell looked to be in his early 30s, with a kind of harsh vitality that came from surviving when others hadn't. His face was angular, handsome in a severe way, with eyes that missed nothing. Those eyes fixed on Luke with an intensity that felt like being skinned alive. "So," Tazewell said in English, his voice carrying easily across the space between them, "you're the white man who thinks he can steal my sister." "I haven't stolen anything," Luke replied, stopping at what felt like a respectful distance. "Nayeli came to me of her own will, because of dreams." Tazewell's tone made it clear what he thought of that. Dreams that convince her to abandon her people for a stranger. Nayeli stepped forward. "Brother, silence." The word cracked like a whip. You left like a thief in the night. You dishonored our family, our clan. And for what? For this?" He gestured at Luke with contempt. "A white rancher who'll use you until he tires of having a Apache woman warming his bed." Luke felt heat rise in his face, but Nayeli's hand on his arm kept him from responding in anger. This was a test, he realized. Everything was a test. "I would never dishonor your sister," he said carefully. "I offer her a place at my side, as my equal, as my wife if she'll have me." Several of the warriors laughed, not pleasant laughter. One said something in Apache that made others nod grimly. "Your wife?" Tazewell stood slowly, and Luke saw he was taller than expected, moving with a warrior's economy. "You know nothing of our ways, our beliefs. You think words make a marriage? You think your white man's God will bless a union your people see as abomination? I think the dreams that brought us together matter more than what others think. Dreams." Tazewell spat the word. "Let me tell you about dreams. White man, I dream too. I dream of our lands returned, our people free, the invaders driven back across the great water. Those are dreams worth having. Not this fantasy my sister has poisoned herself with." "Grandmother believed," Nayeli began. "Grandmother is dead." Tazewell's control cracked momentarily, showing the pain beneath. "Her dreams died with her, and you dishonor her memory by using her words to justify this betrayal. It's not betrayal to choose my own path. Your path is with your people. Your duty is to marry a warrior, bear Apache children, keep our ways alive." Tazewell's eyes burned. "Not to spread your legs for the enemy?" Luke moved before thought, stepping in front of Nayeli. "You're her brother, so I'll let that pass. Once, speak of her with disrespect again, and family or not, we'll have a problem." The warriors tensed, hands moving to weapons, but Tazewell actually smiled, a cold expression that held no humor. "At last, the rancher shows some fire." He began to circle them slowly, like a mountain cat sizing up prey. "Tell me, white man, what do you know of fighting, of war? You tend cattle, mend fences, count coins. What makes you think you're worthy of a warrior's sister? I don't need to be a warrior. I just need to be worthy of Nayeli." "The same thing, fool." Tazewell stopped directly in front of him. "She is Apache. To be worthy of her is to prove you can protect her, provide for her, die for her if needed. Can you do that, rancher? Can you stand against her enemies and yours? I stood against 8 men from town yesterday. I'll stand against whoever I need to. 8 townsmen." The contempt was back. "Farmers with guns, playing at being dangerous. You think that prepares you for real battle?" One of the warriors called out something, and Tazewell nodded. "Kohana reminds me, you had help, our young Samuel, disobeying orders as usual. Would you have been so brave alone? We'll never know." "No? Then let's find out." Tazewell stepped back, unbuckling his gun belt and letting it fall. "You want my sister? Fight for her. Here, now. Prove you're more than words and dreams." Luke's mouth went dry. He'd been expecting something like this, but expecting and facing were different things. Tazewell was trained from birth as a warrior, had survived battles Luke couldn't imagine. "Brother, this is foolish." Nayeli started. "Be quiet, woman. This is between men now." Tazewell's eyes never left Luke. Unless the rancher is too frightened, perhaps he prefers to hide behind rifles and walls. Luke handed his rifle to Nayeli, then unbuckled his own gun belt. His father had taught him to fight, rough frontier brawling. Nothing fancy, but he doubted barroom tactics would serve him well against an Apache war chief. "If I win," he asked, "then we talk. If you lose—" Tazewell shrugged. "Then you were never worthy, and Nayeli comes home where she belongs. And if someone dies, then the survivor bears that burden." Tazewell pulled his shirt over his head, revealing a torso marked with scars from many battles. "But don't worry. Rancher, I won't kill you. Death would be too easy. I want you to live knowing you weren't enough." They cleared a rough circle, the warriors forming its boundaries. Nayeli stood rigid, her face a mask, but Luke could see her hands clenched white-knuckled around his rifle. Tazewell moved first, faster than Luke expected. The Apache's fist caught him in the ribs, driving the air from his lungs. Luke stumbled back, barely avoiding the follow-up strike that would have ended things quickly. He swung back, a solid rancher's haymaker, but Tazewell flowed around it like water. A knee to Luke's thigh sent him to one knee, and only a desperate roll saved him from the kick aimed at his head. "Too slow," Tazewell taunted. "Is this how you'll protect my sister? Rolling in the dirt?" Luke pushed to his feet, spitting blood from where he'd bitten his tongue. He could hear the warriors laughing, making bets on how long he'd last. But underneath their voices, he heard something else. Nayeli whispering in Apache. Prayers or curses. He couldn't tell. Tazewell came again. A blur of motion. This time Luke was ready, taking the hit to give one back. His fist connected with the Apache's jaw, snapping his head to the side. It was like hitting oak, solid, barely yielding, but it was contact. "Better," Tazewell admitted, working his jaw. Then he smiled that cold smile again. But not enough. The real fight began then. Tazewell stopped playing, stopped teaching lessons. He fought like what he was, a man who'd survived when others hadn't, who'd learned that mercy was a luxury the weak couldn't afford. Luke took punishment that would have dropped most men. Fists, elbows, knees, all delivered with precision meant to hurt without crippling. His left eye swelled shut. Blood ran from his nose, his lips. His ribs screamed with each breath. But he didn't fall, and more importantly, he didn't stop fighting back. Every hit Tazewell landed, Luke answered, not as skillfully, not as powerfully, but with a dogged determination that refused to yield. When Tazewell's knee buckled from a lucky kick, Luke pressed the advantage. When the Apache's guard dropped for a split second, Luke's fist found its mark. The warriors had stopped laughing, even stopped betting. They watched now with something approaching respect as the white rancher took everything their war chief could deliver and kept coming back. "Why?" Tazewell panted during a brief pause, both men circling warily. "Why won't you stay down?" Luke spat blood, managed what might have been a smile through split lips. "Same reason she crossed a desert for me. Some things are worth bleeding for." Something shifted in Tazewell's eyes then. The contempt was still there, but mixed now with something else. He came forward again, but this time Luke was ready with a new strategy, not trying to match the warrior's skill, but using his rancher's strength and stubbornness. When Tazewell struck, Luke took the hit and wrapped him up, bearing him to the ground. They rolled in the dirt, fighting rough and close where technique mattered less than will. Luke's greater weight told here, his work-hardened muscles holding what they grabbed. They broke apart, both breathing hard. Tazewell had blood running from his own nose now. Dirt ground into the cuts on his torso. He looked at Luke with new calculation. "You fight like a badger," he said. "No skill, no grace, just stubborn refusal to die. Whatever works," Luke gasped. Tazewell nodded slowly, then did something unexpected. He stepped back, raising one hand in a gesture Luke didn't understand. "Enough," the Apache said. "You've proven something. Not skill, certainly, not wisdom, but you have heart, rancher. And perhaps that's what my foolish sister sees in you." Luke swayed on his feet, unsure if this was another trick. "Does that mean—" "It means we talk, as I promised." Tazewell retrieved his shirt, wincing at his own collection of bruises. "But first, you sit before you fall. It would shame us both if I had to catch you." Nayeli rushed to Luke's side as he lowered himself painfully to the ground. Her hands were gentle but efficient, checking his injuries with practiced skill. When she touched his swollen eye, he couldn't suppress a hiss of pain. "Stubborn fool," she murmured, but there was pride in her voice. Tazewell watched them with an unreadable expression. He accepted a water skin from one of his warriors, drank deeply, then tossed it to Luke. "Drink. We have much to discuss." The water was warm but clean, and Luke had never tasted anything better. Around them, the Apache warriors relaxed slightly, some even showing what might have been approval in their glances. He'd passed some kind of test, though he suspected it was only the first of many. "You fought with honor," Tazewell said, settling cross-legged across from them. "Poorly, but with honor. That matters among my people." "I wasn't trying to impress your people," Luke said, "just trying to prove I meant what I said." "And what is it you mean, exactly?" Tazewell's eyes sharpened. "You speak of marriage, of making my sister your wife. Do you understand what that means? She would be cut off from her clan, her traditions. Your people would never accept her. Her children would belong to neither world." "Our children," Luke corrected. "And they'd belong to both worlds. Maybe that's what we need, people who can stand with a foot on each side of the divide." Tazewell laughed, but it was bitter. "Pretty words, but I've heard pretty words before. Treaties that promised peace and delivered death. Agreements that recognized our lands until gold was found, or grass for cattle, or simply because white men decided they wanted what was ours. I'm not the government. I'm just one man. One man who represents everything that's destroying us." Tazewell's control slipped again, showing the deep anger beneath. "Do you know what it's like, rancher, to watch your world disappear one piece at a time? To see your people's children taken to schools where they're beaten for speaking their own language? To have everything you are declared savage and wrong?" Luke met his gaze steadily. "No, I don't know that. I won't pretend I do, but I know what it's like to lose family. To watch something you love die despite everything you do to save it. Maybe it's not the same, but loss is loss. Loss is loss," Tazewell repeated softly. He looked at Nayeli then, and his harsh features softened slightly. "Our parents died when she was 7 winters old. I raised her, taught her our ways, tried to keep her safe in a world that grows more dangerous each year. She is all I have left of family." "She still would be," Luke said. "I'm not trying to take her from you. I'm asking to join my life with hers. You would take her from her people." "No, I'd welcome any of her people who came in peace. Your traditions, your language, they'd be honored in my home." One of the warriors snorted in disbelief, saying something sharp in Apache. Tazewell responded curtly, then translated. "Kohana says you speak lies. No white man honors our ways. Then I'll be the first." "Why?" Tazewell leaned forward intently. "Why does she matter so much to you? You met her yesterday. One day, and you're willing to fight, to bleed, to set yourself against your own kind. Why?" Luke was quiet for a moment, trying to find words for something that defied explanation. "Did you ever feel like you were living half a life? Like some part of you was missing, but you didn't know what until you found it?" "No," Tazewell said flatly. But Nayeli spoke up. "He did. When Rising Dove was killed in the cavalry raid 3 summers ago, I saw it, brother. How you walked like a ghost until the grief settled into something you could carry." Tazewell's jaw tightened. "That's different." "Is it?" Nayeli challenged. "You loved her from the time you were boys. Everyone knew you would marry. When she died, part of you died too. The dreams showed me this man, and when I saw him in flesh, I knew, like you knew with Rising Dove. Some things simply are. Rising Dove was Apache. We shared blood, beliefs, understanding. This," he gestured between Luke and Nayeli, "this is oil trying to mix with water. Then we'll find a way to make it work." Luke said, "People said ranching in this desert was impossible too, but here we are." Tazewell studied him for a long moment. "You truly believe you can protect her? When your town turns against you, and they will, when they come to burn you out for harboring an Apache woman, you'll stand. I already stood, yesterday. Ask Samuel." "I did. He told me." Tazewell's expression was thoughtful now. 8 men, and you chose her over them. But 8 men in daylight is different from rifles in the dark. Fire arrows on your roof, poisoned water holes. Your people know how to hate. Rancher, I've seen what they do to race traitors. Then we'll face it together." Together. Tazewell tested the word like foreign food. A white rancher and an Apache woman. Together against 2 worlds that want them apart. He shook his head. You're both fools. Maybe, Luke agreed. But we're fools who choose each other. The sun had climbed higher, and the heat was becoming oppressive. One of the warriors, the one called Kohana, approached and spoke quietly to Tazwell. The war chief listened, nodded, then stood. My men remind me we've been here too long. The army patrols this area, and we have no wish to explain ourselves to soldier chiefs. He looked down at Luke and Nayeli. I need to think on this, to decide whether I let my sister throw her life away or drag her home for her own good. It's not your choice, Nayeli said firmly. Everything is my choice when it comes to protecting you. Tazewell shot back, then he sighed, suddenly looking tired. But perhaps the time for such protection has passed. You're a woman grown, with a woman's right to choose her path, even if that path leads to sorrow. He gestured to his men, who began breaking camp with efficient speed. Within minutes, most signs of their presence had vanished. Tazewell stood at the edge of the camp, looking back at his sister and the battered rancher who'd fought for her. If you do this, he said to Nayeli, if you bind yourself to him and his world rejects you, don't come running back to me. I won't watch you suffer for choosing poorly. I understand, Nayeli replied quietly. Do you? Do you really? Tazewell's voice cracked slightly. You're choosing him over everything, your family, your people, your heritage. For what? For dreams that may be nothing but fevered imaginings? For a man you barely know? Nayeli stood, moving to her brother. She spoke in Apache, her words flowing like water over stones. Luke couldn't understand the language, but he could read the emotion, love, determination, sorrow for the pain she was causing. When she finished, Tazewell pulled her into a fierce embrace. Over her shoulder, his eyes found Luke. If you hurt her, he said simply, if you fail her in any way, I'll find you. No walls, no rifles, no distance will keep you safe. Understand? I understand, Luke said. Tazewell released his sister. Stepping back, there's an old Apache tradition. When a woman chooses a man outside the clan, she can ask for a brother's blessing. It doesn't mean approval. It means the brother acknowledges her choice and promises not to actively work against it. He paused. Are you asking, sister? I'm asking, Nayeli whispered. Tazewell closed his eyes, and when he opened them, Luke saw what the decision cost him. Then you have it, my blessing, such as it is. May it bring you more happiness than I expect. He turned to Luke. There are conditions. You will marry her properly, both your way and ours. You will never raise hand or voice to her in anger. You will honor her beliefs even if you don't share them. You will defend her against any who would harm her, even if it costs your life. Agreed. Agreed, Luke said without hesitation. Then we're done here. Tazewell whistled sharply, and horses appeared as if from nowhere, led by warriors who'd retrieved them during the confrontation. As he swung up onto his mount, he added, one more thing. Rancher, the dreams that brought you together, they're not done with you. Grandmother's visions always had layers, meanings within meanings. Whatever you think you've chosen, the price hasn't been fully paid yet. What does that mean? Luke asked. But Tazewell was already turning his horse. Ask my sister. She heard the same words I did, all those years ago. Maybe she'll share them with you. Maybe she won't. Either way, you'll find out soon enough. The Apache warriors rode out in single file, Tazewell leading, at the crest of the ridge. He paused, looking back one final time. Then they were gone, vanishing into the desert like smoke. Luke and Nayeli stood alone in the sudden quiet. The confrontation was over, but Luke felt like something larger had just begun. His body ached from the fight. His face throbbed where Tazewell's fists had landed, but none of that mattered next to the woman beside him. Your brother hits hard, he said, trying for lightness. He held back. Nayeli replied, if he truly wanted to hurt you, you wouldn't be standing. Comforting. She turned to face him fully, her hands coming up to frame his battered face. You fought for me. No one has ever. White men don't usually. I'm not usual, Luke said. Thought we'd established that. She smiled then, that transformative expression that made every bruise worth it. "No, you're not." Her thumb traced his swollen cheekbone gently. "We should get back, clean these wounds properly. You look like you tried to fight a mountain. Feel like it too." They walked back toward the ranch together, Luke leaning slightly on Nayeli when his legs wobbled. The sun was fully up now, the desert shimmering with heat waves. But despite everything, the pain, the uncertainty ahead, the knowledge that they'd set themselves against two worlds, Luke felt something he hadn't experienced in the year since his father died. Hope. "Nayeli," he said as they walked. "What your brother said about the dreams, about prices not paid. What did he mean?" She was quiet so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, softly, "Grandmother said the dreams would show a path, but walking it would cost everything we thought we knew about ourselves, that we would have to choose not once but many times, and each choice would cut away pieces of who we were until only the truth remained. And you still came to find me." "Yes. Why?" She stopped walking, looking up at him with those midnight eyes that had haunted his sleep. "Because the one thing Grandmother was certain about was this: the dreams don't lie. They show what could be, if we're brave enough to reach for it. And when I saw your face in those visions, I knew that whatever the cost, a life without you would be no life at all." Luke pulled her close then, ignoring the protest of his ribs. She came willingly, her arms wrapping carefully around him. They stood there in the morning sun, two people from different worlds who'd found each other through dreams neither fully understood. Whatever came next, angry townspeople, military intervention, the challenge of building a life between two cultures that had only known conflict, they would face it as they'd faced today, together. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as Luke and Nayeli worked to clean his wounds. She'd made a poultice from desert plants he couldn't name, and while it stung like fire, the swelling was already going down. They sat on the porch, a basin of water between them, the ranch sprawling quiet and peaceful, as if the morning's violence had never happened. "There," Nayeli said, tying off the last bandage around his ribs. "You'll heal. The bruises will be colorful for weeks, but nothing is broken." "Just my pride," Luke said, attempting a smile that pulled at his split lip. "Your brother made me look like a child trying to fight a grown man. You stood longer than most would have. Tazewell has never lost a fight." She began putting away her supplies, movements precise and careful. "You earned his respect, even if he'll never admit it." They were so focused on each other that neither noticed the dust cloud approaching until it was almost too late. Luke grabbed his rifle, then relaxed slightly when he recognized the lead rider. It was Tom Brennan from the neighboring ranch, but he wasn't alone. Behind him rode what looked like half the town, 20 men at least, all armed. "Get inside," Luke said quietly. "No." Nayeli's voice was firm. "We faced them together, remember?" The riders pulled up in the yard, spreading out in a semicircle. Luke noticed they'd positioned themselves to block any escape routes. Tom Brennan's face was grim under his hat brim. "Luke," Tom said, "we need to talk." "So talk. The sheriff's called a town meeting about your situation." Tom's eyes flicked to Nayeli, then back. "Folks are mighty upset about what happened yesterday. Ben Morrison's laid up with a cracked skull, raving about Apache attacks. Ben drew first. My guest defended us. That's all." "Your guest?" Someone in the back spat. "That's what we're calling them now?" Tom held up a hand for silence. "Thing is, Luke, this affects all of us. Having her here, it's like lighting a signal fire for every Apache within 100 miles. People are scared." "Of one woman?" Luke kept his voice level. "She's brought no trouble that wasn't already here." "She is the trouble," another man called out. "Apache murdered my cousin 2 years back. Now we're supposed to just accept one living among us?" "You're supposed to mind your own business," Luke replied. "This is my land, my choice." Tom shifted in his saddle. "That's where you're wrong. Your choices affect everyone. What happens when her people come raiding? When they use your ranch as a base to attack from? That won't happen. You sure about that? Sure enough to bet our families' lives on it? Before Luke could answer, the sound of approaching hoofbeats made everyone turn. 3 riders were coming fast from the west, Sheriff Campbell and 2 deputies. The sheriff's face was like thunder as he took in the scene. "What's this?" Campbell demanded. "I told you men to wait for my word. We got tired of waiting." Someone replied, "Figured we'd handle this ourselves." "Vigilante justice is still murder in the eyes of the law," the sheriff said sharply. "Everyone calm down." He turned to Luke. "Though they've got a point. The situation's changed since yesterday." "How so?" "Got a telegram this morning. Army's sending a patrol out to investigate reports of Apache off the reservation. They'll be here by week's end." Campbell's expression was unreadable. "You still want to harbor her when the cavalry arrives?" Luke felt Nayeli tense beside him. The Army meant forced removal at best, imprisonment or worse at worst. Apache found off reservation without permission faced harsh consequences. "She's not off reservation," Luke said. "She's here as my intended bride. That makes her a resident, not a vagrant." The crowd erupted in shocked voices. "Bride? He's lost his mind. No white woman will have him after this." Sheriff Campbell held up his hand for quiet. "That's not how the Army will see it. Without proper documentation, marriage certificate from a recognized authority. Then we'll get married." Luke said, "Today. Now. You can officiate. Sheriff, you've got the authority." The silence that followed was deafening. Campbell's jaw worked like he was chewing nails. "You're serious? Dead serious?" "I won't do it," the sheriff said flatly. "No legal marriage between white and Apache in this territory. You know that." "The law says no such thing," Luke countered. "You're thinking of Negro restrictions. There's no law against marrying an Indian." "Unwritten law counts too," someone shouted. "It's unnatural." Nayeli stepped forward then, her voice cutting through the mob's anger. "What's unnatural is hate. I've harmed none of you, threatened none of you. Yet you come here with guns and rage because of my blood?" She looked at each man in turn. "Look at me. See me. I am not your enemy unless you make me one." Pretty words from a savage. Ben Morrison's brother Seth snarled. "How many white folks you killed, woman?" "None," Nayeli replied calmly. "How many Apache have you killed?" Seth's face reddened. "That's different. That was war." "Was it? When you burned our winter camps? When you shot our women gathering herbs? When you poisoned our water holes?" Her voice remained level, but Luke could hear the steel underneath. "Don't speak to me of war. Your people wrote the rules. Mine simply learned to survive them." "Enough," Sheriff Campbell said. "This is getting us nowhere." He looked at Luke. "Here's what's going to happen. The woman leaves. Today, I'll give her safe passage to the reservation boundary. Make sure she gets there unharmed. You go back to your life, rebuild what you've broken here. In time, people will forget." "No," Luke said. "Then you're a fool." Campbell's facade of patience cracked. "You think love conquers all? This isn't some dime novel romance. This is real life, where choices have consequences. You stand with her, you lose everything, your ranch, your place here, maybe your life. Then I lose it," Luke said simply. "But I keep my honor." Tom Brennan spoke up then. "Luke, think about this. Your father built this ranch from nothing. Fought Indians, drought, everything the desert could throw at him. You want to throw away his legacy for—" "My father's legacy was teaching me to do what's right, not what's easy." Luke met Tom's gaze. "He also taught me that a man's word is his bond. I gave mine to her. I won't break it." "Noble words," the sheriff said. "But nobility won't stop bullets when things turn ugly." It was then that Nayeli did something unexpected. She began to speak in Apache, her voice rising and falling in what sounded like a chant or prayer. The white men shifted nervously, hands moving to weapons, but she continued unperturbed. When she finished, she looked directly at Sheriff Campbell. "I have spoken the words of binding in my tongue, by the laws of my people. This man and I are joined. What your law recognizes matters less than what the spirits have witnessed." Heathen nonsense, someone muttered, but others looked uneasy. There was something unsettling about the way she'd spoken, the absolute certainty in her voice. "This changes nothing," Campbell said, but he seemed less sure. "The army will find a married woman living with her husband," Luke interrupted. "Apache or not, that's not a crime. Not yet, anyway." The standoff stretched taut. 20 armed men against 2 people who refused to bend. Luke could see some of the men wavering. Tom Brennan looked uncomfortable. A few others wouldn't meet his eyes. The moments balanced on a knife's edge. Then, unexpectedly, one of the sheriff's deputies spoke up. "Maybe we should let it be. Sheriff, man's got a right to choose his own path, long as he's not hurting anyone." "He's hurting all of us," Seth Morrison protested. "Is he?" The deputy, a younger man named Carl Winters, looked around. "I mean, really? She's one woman. Luke's been a good neighbor for years. Maybe we're making this bigger than it needs to be." "You taking their side, Carl?" Campbell's voice was dangerous. "I'm taking the side of sense." Carl replied steadily. "We start shooting folks for who they love. Where does it end? My grandmother was Mexican. Some folks didn't like when she married my grandfather neither." The comparison clearly rankled some of the men, but it gave others pause. The mood began to shift, anger giving way to uncertainty. Tom Brennan was the first to lower his weapon. "Carl's got a point. Luke's never done us wrong before. Maybe we give him a chance to prove this can work." "You're all going soft." Seth spat. "When the Apache come raiding?" "If they come," Tom corrected. "And if they do, we'll deal with it then. But I won't be party to murder over what might happen." One by one, other men began to back down. Not happily, not with approval, but with the resignation of those who saw no good coming from immediate violence. Sheriff Campbell watched his support eroding with visible frustration. Finally, he holstered his pistol with sharp movements. "Fine. You want to play house with your Apache woman. That's your funeral. But mark my words. When this goes bad, and it will, don't come crying to us for help. Wouldn't dream of it," Luke said. The sheriff turned his horse. "Come on, men. We've wasted enough time here." As they began to ride out, he looked back one last time. "The army patrol arrives Friday. Better have your story straight by then." The riders departed in groups, some casting dark looks back, others seeming almost ashamed. Tom Brennan lingered, walking his horse closer to the porch. "Luke," he said quietly, "I hope you know what you're doing." "I hope so too. Tom." Tom looked at Naomi, really looked at her for the first time. "Ma'am, I apologize for our behavior. Fear makes fools of us all sometimes." Naomi inclined her head gracefully. "Fear is understandable. Mr. Brennan..." "It's what we do with that fear that defines us." Tom touched his hat brim and rode away, leaving Luke and Naomi alone in the settling dust. The sun was starting its descent toward the mountains, painting the world in shades of gold and amber. "That was close," Luke said, suddenly feeling the weight of what had almost happened. "Yes." Naomi took his hand. "But they backed down. Some of them. At least, that's something. The sheriff won't give up, neither will Seth Morrison and his like. No, but today we gain time, and perhaps a few who will at least not actively work against us." She squeezed his hand. "The words I spoke, they were truly binding among my people. If you accept them..." Luke turned to face her fully. "I accept them. In whatever language, by whatever law, I accept them." She smiled then, that rare, transformative expression. "Then we are bound, you and I, for better or worse, as your people say." "For better or worse," Luke agreed, pulling her close despite his protesting ribs. They stood together as shadows lengthened across the ranch. 2 people who had chosen each other against all odds and opposition. The sheriff was right about one thing. This was no dime novel romance. This was harder, more dangerous, more real than any story. But it was theirs. And for now, that was enough. 3 months had passed since that tense afternoon when the townsmen had come calling. The desert had shifted from summer's brutal heat to autumn's gentler touch, and the ranch had settled into new rhythms that included 2 lives intertwined where once there had been only one. Luke stood by the corral, watching Nayeli work with a young Mustang they'd captured the week before. She moved with fluid grace, speaking to the horse in a mixture of Apache and English, her hands gentle but firm. The animal, which had tried to kick him twice, followed her like a devoted dog. "You're making me look bad," he called out. "That horse is supposed to be impossible." She glanced over with that small smile he'd come to treasure. "Nothing is impossible. You just speak different languages," she demonstrated by placing her hand on the Mustang's neck, and the animal immediately calmed. "See? He understands respect, not dominance." It was one of many things she'd taught him, new ways of seeing the land, the animals, the world around them. In return, he'd taught her the business of ranching, the accounts and contracts that kept the place running. They'd found their rhythm, each bringing strengths the other lacked. The morning sun caught the silver in her hair ornaments, a wedding gift from Tazewell, delivered by Samuel a month after their confrontation. Along with the ornaments had come a terse message. "For my sister, who chose her path, may she walk it well." It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was acknowledgement, and Nayeli had wept when she read it. "Riders coming," Nayeli said suddenly, shading her eyes to peer eastward. 3, moving slow." Luke retrieved his rifle from where it leaned against the fence, but Nayeli touched his arm. "No, I know that horse. It's Tom Brennan's bay mare." Sure enough, Tom rode into view, accompanied by Carl Winters and, surprisingly, Reverend Michael Chen, the Chinese-American minister who served the small church in town. Luke had always liked the Reverend, a man who knew what it was like to be an outsider. "Morning, Luke, ma'am." Tom touched his hat brim to Nayeli, a gesture of respect that would have been unthinkable 3 months ago. "Mind if we have a word?" "Coffee's on," Luke offered, curious about this unlikely delegation. They gathered on the porch, the Reverend accepting coffee gratefully while Tom and Carl seemed nervous, fidgeting with their hats. "Finally." Tom cleared his throat. "Thing is, Luke, we've been talking, some of us in town, I mean, about you two, about everything. And we figure maybe we were wrong," Carl said bluntly. "You've been nothing but peaceful. No raids, no trouble. Hell, Jim Patterson says Nayeli helped his wife with her birthing pains last month. Knew some herb remedy that worked better than laudanum." Luke glanced at Nayeli, who kept her expression neutral. She hadn't mentioned helping the Patterson woman. Reverend Chen set down his cup with careful precision. "I've come with a proposition. You spoke of marriage, of making things official. I'm prepared to perform a ceremony, if you're willing." "The sheriff said," Luke began. "The sheriff doesn't speak for God." Chen interrupted gently. "I've prayed on this matter extensively. Love is sacred, regardless of the forms it takes. If you wish to be married in the Christian tradition, I will officiate." Nayeli spoke for the first time. "Why would you do this? Your congregation will not approve." "Some won't," Chen admitted. "But others might surprise you. Mrs. Patterson, for one, has been quite vocal about the kindness you showed her, and there are others who remember that Christ commanded us to love our neighbors, not judge them." "This could cost you your position," Luke pointed out. Chen smiled. "I've been run out of towns before for ministering to those others wouldn't accept. Chinese railroad workers, Mexican farmers, now perhaps an Apache woman and her husband. If that's my fate, I accept it gladly." Tom leaned forward. "It's not just the Reverend. Some of us have been thinking, if you two can make this work, maybe there's hope for other things, other ways of living together that don't involve shooting first." "The sheriff won't like this," Luke said. "The sheriff's authority ends at legal matters," Carl replied. "Check the territorial statutes myself. There's no law against marrying an Indian. Like you said, he can bluster all he wants, but he can't stop a legal marriage performed by a recognized minister." Luke looked at Nayeli, saw his own surprise mirrored in her face. After months of hostility and isolation, this offer of acceptance, limited though it might be, felt almost surreal. "When?" was all he asked. "Tomorrow, if you're willing," Chen said. "Best to act before opposition can organize. I thought perhaps here, at your ranch, neutral ground, so to speak, under the cottonwood." Nayeli said softly, "Where the dreams brought us together." The tree stood stark against the morning sky, its lightning-struck branches reaching upward like prayers. Luke nodded slowly. "Under the cottonwood." Then, after the men left, Luke and Nayeli stood together in contemplative silence. So much had happened in 3 months, the army patrol that had come and gone. Satisfied with their paperwork and Reverend Chen's written testimony, the slow thawing of some townspeople while others remained frozen in their hatred, the daily work of building a life together across cultural divides. "Are you sure?" Luke asked. "A Christian ceremony. It's not your way." "We had the Apache ceremony." Nayeli reminded him. "The words I spoke that day were binding. This is for your world, your people. Balance in all things." She touched his face gently. "Besides, the Reverend is right. Love is sacred. Whatever language speaks it." The next morning dawned clear and bright. Luke had expected, feared, that trouble might come, but the small gathering under the cottonwood was peaceful. Tom Brennan stood as witness, along with Carl Winters. Sarah Patterson had come with her new baby, defying her husband's grumbling. Even old Moses Goldberg, the Jewish merchant who knew his own share of prejudice, had ridden out to offer his quiet support. Nayeli wore the dress she'd arrived in, now cleaned and decorated with additional beadwork she'd done in quiet evenings. Her hair was braided with the silver ornaments from her brother, and she carried a small bouquet of desert wildflowers: purple lupine, golden brittlebush, scarlet Indian paintbrush. Luke had no fine clothes, but he'd cleaned up best he could. His face finally healed from Tazewell's fists. As they stood before Reverend Chen, he was struck again by the sheer improbability of it all, that dreams had brought them together, that they'd survived family opposition and town hostility, that they stood here now making public what their hearts had already sealed. "Dearly beloved," Chen began, his voice carrying across the desert morning, "we gather here to witness something rare and precious, 2 people choosing love over fear, understanding over division." The ceremony was simple, the traditional words adapted slightly to acknowledge their unique situation. When Chen asked if anyone objected, Luke held his breath, but the small gathering remained silent. Even the desert wind seemed to pause, as if nature itself blessed this moment. "Do you, Luke, take Nayeli to be your wife, to honor and cherish, in sickness and health, despite all opposition and obstacles, for as long as you both shall live?" "I do," Luke said, his voice strong and clear. "Do you, Nayeli, take Luke to be your husband, to stand beside him in joy and sorrow, to bridge 2 worlds with your love, for as long as you both shall live?" "I do," she replied, her dark eyes shining. "Then, by the power vested in me, and in defiance of those who would say otherwise, I pronounce you husband and wife. What God and choice have joined together, let no prejudice tear asunder." When Luke kissed his bride, the small crowd actually applauded. Sarah Patterson wiped away tears, her baby cooing as if in approval. Even tough Tom Brennan looked suspiciously misty-eyed. The celebration was modest: cake that Sarah had somehow managed to bake and transport, whiskey that Moses had contributed, quiet congratulations from those brave enough to attend. But to Luke and Nayeli, it felt like a feast of acceptance. As the sun set, their guests departed with warm wishes and promises to talk sense to others in town. Luke and Nayeli stood alone under the cottonwood, now blessed as their wedding tree despite its broken branches. "My grandmother was right," Nayeli said softly. "The dreams did show truth, but she was also right about the cost. We've both lost pieces of who we were." "Maybe," Luke agreed. "But look what we've gained." He gestured to their ranch, their home, where Apache wisdom mixed with ranching knowledge, where two languages were spoken, where love had built something new from the collision of two worlds. It wasn't perfect. There were still those in town who crossed the street when Nayeli appeared, still tensions with her people who saw her choice as betrayal. The path ahead remained uncertain, filled with challenges they couldn't yet imagine, but they would walk it together. These two dreamers who had found each other across impossible divides, under the desert stars, beside the lightning-struck cottonwood that had witnessed their journey from dream to reality. Luke and Nayeli Harding began their married life. In years to come, their ranch would become a haven, a place where Apache and White could meet in peace, where children of mixed heritage would learn both worlds' wisdom, where love's persistence would slowly, carefully, build bridges that distrust had burned. It wouldn't be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever was. But on this night, with the desert wind blessing their union and the stars writing their story across the sky, anything seemed possible. Sometimes, the most profound journeys begin with dreams, and sometimes, if we're brave enough to follow where they lead, those dreams reshape not just two lives, but the very fabric of the world around them. Their love story had begun with visions in the night. Now, it would continue in the bright reality of dawn, proof that even in a divided land, hearts that truly see each other can find a way home. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I hope you enjoyed following Luke and Nayeli's journey from dreams to reality. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to From Wild West channel for more tales of courage, love, and adventure from the American frontier. What did you think of Luke and Nayeli's story? Share your thoughts below.